Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was
Okay, so I said I was gonna keep doing these. So on to my mom and my dad's experience. And then I'll be heading to bed after this, but if these get enough likes, if this gets enough likes, then I will do more. Um, so about a year or two ago now, um, maybe longer than that. It was around after we lost our golden retriever, Max. Um, After we lost him, I had the app called one day. I had the app called Necrophonic. It's like for those of you who don't know, it's a spirit talker. It helps you communicate with the other side. Also with that, you have to know how to close the door properly, just like with any things that you interact with that could contact the dead. So I had the app downloaded, and I think I was out with my friend this night, and I came home, or I was at work, one or the other, I forgot what it was, but we had a camera that sees inside of our house. We got it specifically for our dogs when all 3 dogs were alive. We used to have 4 dogs, but the one dog died in 2017, so we went down to 3, and now we only have 1. But I must have been at work or something, and it was a Sunday night. Yeah, it was a Sunday night. I was doing my mom was doing her laundry. And I went downstairs and I was talking to her, and I loaded up the Necrophonic app, just to communicate with, whatever, see if there was a spirit. Just so happens that camera, they unplugged it for quite a while and then plugged it back in, and then we lost power the one day. I think it was a really bad storm. I don't remember exactly what it was that knocked out the power, but we lost power, and when the power came back on, it started talking like the Necrophonic app, and it started laughing. That was one of my mom and dad's first experiences in this house. They never experienced anything in this house, as I was always the one that was experiencing things in this house. But my mom told me that they unplugged the camera because it scared them so bad. That camera is now in a cabinet, but there's been times where my dad will wake up early in the morning, like around 1:30, 2 o'clock, because our dog sometimes doesn't let him sleep past 3. So the one morning he was up and he was in the living room, and he kept thinking he saw someone go like this, like, like a shadow going like this. And he goes, haha, very funny, Marianne. Thinking that me or my mom are out, like, playing a prank on him. Well, no, it wasn't me and my mom. My mom was still asleep, as she doesn't get up till like 4:30 Eastern Standard Time to go to work. And then I was still asleep because I don't work until I didn't work that day until later. And he told me that he had an experience of a shadow person. It didn't hurt him or anything. It was just kind of, peeking around the corner, like going like this. And this is right around the time that I had the dolls. So I'm thinking it was one of those spirits or the spirits that's attached to me from the old house. Cindy, little girl. And yes, I know it's a little girl because I know her backstory. But then there was numerous experiences where my dad's sleeping in his chair and he feels someone go like that to his forehead. He swears it's my grandfather because my grandfather passed away, and he like feels something poking him in the head, like wake up, wake up, wake up, like trying to wake him up. He swears it's my grandfather, but again, it might be one of the many spirits that's attached to me or whatever else. They've also... Now, the one thing I'm happy about, I don't want to jinx it, knock on wood, there were times where people's Alexas would laugh in the middle of the night. And I told him, I said, today, I told him if Alexa ever laughs in the middle of the night, because we were talking about the camera thing, where we would watch our dogs. And I said, if Alexa ever laughs when you're awake in the living room at 1:30 or whatever time you wake up, unplug her. Unplug her. Do not leave her plugged in. Just unplug her. He goes, I'll do more than just fucking unplug her. I said, okay, but you're gonna be paying for a new one. So I'm the one that bought her. But yeah, that's one of the many experiences in this house. My parents see things. My dog stares down the hall, and I think he's seeing either the spirits of the spirit dolls I have, or the spirits of our dog, or spirits of our cat. Excuse me, spirits of our dogs, or spirits of our cat, or maybe the dolls, or maybe the spirit that's around here. Yeah, that's one of the many, well, those are my parents' experiences now. So, yeah, I may do a whole thing on this, and if people like them, then I may keep my experiences. But yeah, I sometimes get chills in the middle of the night, like if I'm awake and I'm pacing or I'm going down the hallway past the basement, I will run past it. And when I was young, in my early teens, I used to go out, come home late at night, and early in the morning, like 3 a.m., because I was out partying with my friends. And many people are like, oh, how come you don't come out and party, and so on and so forth. It's because I had my party stage when I was 16 through 17, or through 21, and I outgrew it. But I am very lucky when I was coming home in the morning that I did not wind up falling down those stairs. No, I didn't. Coming home at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and pre-gaming before I went out to the club with my friends. And then, yeah, so I'm very lucky that none of that ever happened. But yeah, my parents would always leave the dishes for me when I was younger in the dishwasher for me to put away, for the clean dishes for me to put away, and that was their way of me letting them know that I was home safe, because you would hear me putting away things going, shh, damn it, shh. Yeah, but that's my parents' experiences, and this is all the new house, so we'll be on to the old house pretty soon.
me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8,
I've seen these videos and I've wondered if I should do mine. So I'm gonna do one, and I might have to do a part 2. But my story starts with the house on the left. That was a house that I've grown up in. It was built in the 1890s, and I lived there with my mum. He was a single parent, so she bought the house in 1981, and almost straight away from moving in, weird things started happening. Very paranormal stuff started happening. So I have stories which are my mum's stories, and I've also got my own stories as well, which I'll talk about. So one of the first stories we have is from my mum. So when I was little, about 3 or 4 years old, I was in my bedroom upstairs at the back, and she could hear me talking. So she shouted up, "Who are you talking to? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just talking to the old man that used to live here." So that kind of gave her shivers down the spine. And when she questioned it, she said, who is he? What does he look like? And I said, he's an old man with grey hair and glasses. And then there was another time as well where my mum was woken up in the middle of the night with the sound of the boiler churning away. And she's a very light sleeper, so she got up and she could hear something going on in the kitchen downstairs. So she ran downstairs and noticed that both kitchen taps had been turned on full, and hot water was spraying over the kitchen sink. So she'd gone over and she turned it off, and then she went to check on me, and I was fast asleep. But it couldn't have been me anyway, because I would have had to have gone downstairs, pulled a table up to the sink, turned the taps on. I would have been wet because the water would have splashed. Get back down, push the chair back, get back upstairs and get into bed before my mum had heard it. So that was another thing that happened. And then later on, into sort of like my teenage years, things started to escalate a bit more. I remember coming home from school and finding one of my posters had been folded up into a square and put into one of my drawers. One of the things that we had was TVs would be turned on and off. The CD player would be turned on, really loud music playing. You'd wake up in the middle of the night, go downstairs, and the radio was on. That was one of the most disturbing things that happened. I hated that happening. I always had the feeling that you were being watched in this house, especially my bedroom. I was at the back bedroom, and it never felt a very nice place to be. One of the other things that we used to see is clocks would go flying off the walls. There was one time in the living room when me and my mum were having a chat, and she had a light fitting that was a bit like a chandelier, not as big as a chandelier, and we were talking, and it was a huge crash from upstairs in my mum's bedroom, which is what you can see on the first floor. It was so loud and heavy, it made the chandelier sway backwards and forwards. So we ran upstairs, and there was nothing out of place. We did get some people to come round to check on the house, to sort of bless the house, who were a bit sort of, I wouldn't say paranormal investigators, but they were expert in that type of field. And they concluded that the reason for the chandelier swinging was that my mum's bed must have been picked up and dropped for that to happen. And then later on, things would go missing around the house. Nothing like major, but a CD would go missing, and then you'd find it in the most bizarre place. I remember sort of like items of stuff going missing, and then you'd find them under the bed. And when I say under the bed covers, and that was a bit weird. Glasses would shatter in the cupboards. That was another thing. And then when I got a bit older, I remember a girl that I was in a relationship, she moved in with me temporarily while we were finding accommodation. And when she moved in, that's when things went even worse. I remember having a friend round, and I was in the kitchen making a drink, and the top of a milk top would started to shake as if it was being lifted up and down. I remember moving the milk container to another part of the kitchen, and it was still happening, and that kind of freaked people out a little bit. There was times when you honestly thought there was someone downstairs in the house, like someone had broken in. There were people, it felt like someone was walking around downstairs, and then you'd get the courage and you'd go downstairs and there was no one there. There was one very weird night, and I was asleep and I was woken up, and it felt like someone was shaking me awake. And when I woke up, it was my girlfriend's deceased mum shaking me, saying, "You have to look after her." And that was a creepy night. And another thing that used to happen was the beds used to shake. Not like The Exorcist, not to that sort of excessive amount of shaking, but the bed used to shake as if someone was wiggling it, which was not pleasant. Another thing that would happen is you'd be asleep, or you'd be trying to drift off, or you're just trying to get sleep, and then you'd feel like someone sat on your bed. That wasn't nice. And one of the other telltale signs was we had cats, and the cats were always hissing in corners. I think the most up-to-date experience that I had was a time when I temporarily moved back to my mum's when I was in my 30s, while I was in between houses. I was getting a new place, and I went to my room and I was trying to get to sleep, and something landed on the bed. So I turned my bedside light on, and the bedroom light bulb had fell out onto the bed. What makes it more interesting is it was a bayonet light, so you had to push up and then twist to put the light in or out, so you can't just unscrew and fall out. So I don't know how that happened. The house on the right hand side is my grandmother's house. Now everyone who's had anything to do with that house has had a paranormal experience. Even my grandfather, who was ex-military, he was one of these no-nonsense type of blokes. He even had experiences himself with paranormal activity. And like I say, every single person who's been in that house has had some sort of story that they've come away with. So, depending on what people think about this particular video, I'm happy to do another video about the house on the right, which is my grandmother's ex-house. And then in addition to that, I've got other stories from when I was in Scotland, another one when I was in Gibraltar, and a house that I used to live in as a bed sit. And then I've got another story from the house I'm currently living in now. But let me know what you think.
Okay, so my thing is glitching, but I've seen like these Audacity stitches about ghosts, and I've had a couple of ghost experiences since I've been like 16, and I'm gonna tell one. So my first one was in Spain when I was 16, but I'm gonna start off with like the most recent one that's like fresh in my brain. So I have always kind of believed in ghosts, but this was the one that like really stuck with me. So I worked as a realtor in Chicago for like a year, and you get to work with some really cool buildings, and I had a client that wanted to see a bunch of high rises, but she wanted to see one historical building in particular. And it's really, really uncommon to find a high rise or like even a mid rise that is historical in Chicago that's like a managed building, because that's what I primarily worked in. And she wanted something that had like 20 floors or more. And so I found this building, or she found this building. She's like, can you tour it? And I was like, sure. So we looked at like 2 new construction high rises, and she was like, I like it. It just doesn't have the character that I'm looking for. And like, bear with me, this is all relevant to the story. So she was like, these are great, but they just don't have the character I'm looking for. So we skipped the other 3 buildings that I had to show her, and I took her straight to this like mid-rise in the Loop that was built, I think in like 1904, and it had, I think, 20 floors. Don't quote me on this, but I'm not going to say the building, because even though I had a ghost experience in this building, I would 100% live here, and I don't want people to not rent there because of a ghost story. So we get to the building, and she's like in love with the outside already, and then we go in the lobby, and like I can tell she's sold. I was sold. And we meet the leasing agent, and you know, we're walking towards the, you know, the leasing agent for the property that lets you into the unit and show you the unit and stuff. And we're walking towards the elevator bank, and there's a picture of John Dillinger and his wife. And if you're not from Chicago, you're not familiar with John Dillinger, he is like the really famous gangster that was also famous like Al Capone, and was gunned down in an alley. They made the movie Public Enemies with Johnny Depp about him. And he and his wife were in pictures on either side of like the hallway that led to the elevator. And the leasing agent was like, oh yeah, he, this used to be the German Cultural Center, and they had a lot of galas. And if you remember that scene in Public Enemies where Johnny Depp meets Marianne Cotillard's character, at like the coat rack, they met in real life at the building that we were touring that is now an apartment building. And so I'm a history buff. I was like, oh my God, that's so exciting. Like, John Dillinger met his wife here, you know, he's in psychopath, but like part of Chicago history. And my client was totally broke in. So we go upstairs, and they made the ballroom, have not changed a thing, like the flooring, chandeliers, they just moved gym equipment in. It's so pretty. And then we go up and we look at the pool, and it's an original 1920s pool. They have not changed a single thing. It's like tiling, everything is so, it's like you stepped into a time capsule. And we were just like blown away, me and my client. I was like, if you don't take it, I will. And we go and see the unit, and I don't remember what floor it was on. It was on a higher floor because it was up past the L. And I think I mentioned that this building was in the Loop, because that's important, because that's where you get some more historical buildings. She loved the unit. She's like, it was a little dark, but it had like domed windows and like vaulted ceilings, and it was just chef's kiss, perfect unit, huge for a 1-bed. And she's like, oh, I think I'm gonna take it. And I was like, awesome, love it. Loved the client, loved the unit. What is there to like be upset about? We get in the elevator. And I press the 9th floor, and then as the doors are closing, this woman gets in the elevator, and she's like really short. I mean, I'm 6 feet tall, and so everybody's a little short to me, but she was really short, and she was wearing like this pleated maroon skirt and like this buttoned up tight-ish blazer that was also maroon, and like these little heels. And I was like, you know, in Chicago, you see people that dress like very thrift store chic. And so I was like, maybe this is one of those girls. And so I was like, what floor? She just doesn't answer me. And my client is like, what floor? She doesn't answer her. And the leasing agent is like, and I was like, so the woman just doesn't press a floor. The doors close. We're going down the floors, and then I was like, oh, do you live here? Like, how do you like the building? Because I'm like, nudge, like, tell me about the building. And the woman just doesn't answer. And I don't think I mentioned that the elevator got really cold when she walked in, like 20-degree temperature drop. And the woman's just not answering me. And so I just turn and I take a closer look at her face, and she had like the really maroon lipstick, you know, if you Google like a picture of like Marlene Dietrich, the actress in like the 20s, or like Mae West, that makeup, like super thin eyebrows, very defined lips with like the very defined Cupid's bow. And I was like, people don't do their makeup like that anymore, you know, like that's just not something that you see on the street. And her face was like really like pale and like waxy looking. And my client just kind of started to like freak out. And then the door, our elevator just stops and she gets out on like the 12th floor. And I know you guys were like, the 13th. No, it was the 12th. And I was like, okay, have a good day. She just gets out of the elevator, walks very smoothly, or not say it was a glide, and just turns and goes right. And I get out of the elevator and I look and the woman's gone. The woman is gone. She's not in the hallway. And I did not get out of the elevator with enough time for her to like have gone into an apartment. So that was not a person. And then the elevator just gets warm again. Super warm. This was also July. The elevator doors close and the leasing agent is like freaking out. She's like, I'm so sorry. Like that's, you know, and it immediately like 2 and 2 is John Dillinger's wife. It was the lady from the picture. This lady from the picture. And the leasing agent is like, sometimes people see her. Sometimes people see her. She doesn't do anything. She doesn't do anything. And then my client is like, oh my God, I knew something was up. I knew something was up. And at first she was like, it doesn't really bother me. It doesn't really bother me. And the leasing agent is like, yeah, sometimes like people see her in the laundry rooms and like, you know, they'll like see her, you know, outside apartment doors. And that was when my client was like, So she went with one of like the classic, like all glass high rises. And she was a great client, but she got spooked. So yeah, that's one of my ghost stories. That's the most recent one. That was in 2022. And yeah, that was crazy. That was really crazy. It was really cool. Also, if you're like from Chicago and you're able to figure out what building I'm talking about, please don't dox it and move there, because she's a harmless ghost. She's historical, and everything that I've heard, she seems pretty chill. So yeah.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go.
Hello, it's me, back for part 2. I didn't think people were actually going to be interested in hearing more, because like the top stitch of that video is a woman who had a demon baby living in her house. A demon baby. So you can understand why I don't know why people want to hear more of my stories. But I got a lot of people. There was 4,000 people that saw my video and counting. And that was really cool that people were like, I want to hear more stories, because I have a decent amount. So I'm going to tell a big one that happened to my dad, and it also happened to my mom. So some background, because that is important for the story. My family didn't do like European vacations growing up. We like would like go to Florida, yes, but we are big history buffs, and we are more interested in going on like historical tours of like historically significant sites. So like Jamestown, Yorktown, Williamsburg, Gettysburg, the Alamo, you know, places like that. I ate that up. That was me. I'm like a weird kid. I mean, I'm 28. I'm not a kid, but I was a weird kid and continue to be. So, also we are a big military family. My dad is a Vietnam veteran. I wear his friend who went missing in Vietnam, his POW bracelet, MIA, POW MIA bracelet. And so we're, you know, big into like the military stuff. So one summer we decided to go to this place called Mackinac Island, which is in Michigan. You can only get there once you get up to Mackinac City. You have to take like a ferry that's like 30 minutes to the island, and it's old. It was the site of a Revolutionary War battlefield. Very historic, very haunted, and it's stunning. No cars are allowed on the island. It's all original like architecture. Like they use horse and buggies as like their Ubers. I mean, it's so freaking pretty. So yeah, it's really, really cool. And part of the haunted is that right below the Revolutionary War fort that is right on like the green when you get off the ferry, is a massive green space where people like play like frisbee and like, I'm sure pickleball now, but it's been a long time since I've been there. And it was a ancient Indian burial ground that in like the early 1900s, they decided, let's just dig them up and dump them in the lake. And so, yeah, that probably doesn't help with the activity on the island. So my parents booked a cottage at the very top of the island, which is like a 2-mile bike. Most people bike around the island. And or a 2-mile, horse and buggy ride. And so to get up there, you had to pass a battlefield. And it's very dark at night. There's like no lights. And our cottage was actually built on the site of the island's unsolved murder. And our cottage was the cottage right next to where they found the girl's body, unalived. So, interestingly enough, nothing ever happened with that. We didn't have any experiences in that place. But, yeah, so that was wild. But one night, anyway, we were at dinner. And it was like, it wrapped up at like 11:30. We were staying out. We were just kind of like hanging and talking with people. And my dad was like, okay, we don't want to walk. We don't want to bike. It's dark. There's no trail lights going up to this cabin villa place. So we get a dude that has a horse and buggy. He's like an older guy that's been driving it for 30 years. And he's like, hop on in. So we hop in. It's my dad in the front with him. They're chatting away. The horse, he's not saying much. And then me and my mom in the second row in the back. And then there's one row behind us that doesn't have any seats. And this, I don't know if I said this, but this was the year before my sophomore year of high school. So I was about 15. And my mom and I are just like quiet. We're tired. She had wine. She's like, I'm tired. So my dad, as I said, Vietnam veteran, he's very jaded, skeptic, quiet, occasionally angry, and I hear him gasp. And this shocks me because my dad doesn't believe in anything. I mean, he doesn't believe in anything. He's not scared of things. He doesn't believe in anything. He thinks ghosts are crap. He's scared of people because he's like, people are the greatest animals of all. And I'm like, preach, I agree that. But he shrieks and he's like, who is sitting behind Stephanie? And I was like, no one's sitting behind me, Dad. And he's like, there was somebody sitting behind Stephanie. And we're passing this like big open field. And the driver looks back and he's like, oh, well, what did he look like? And my dad describes him. And he's like, yeah, we have a couple of Revolutionary War soldiers. He's like, I'll be driving people up and down to the cottages and he'll just sit in the back and he'll just get out when he feels like it. And I'll see him in like my rearview mirror. My dad had nothing to say to this. He did not know how to react. He didn't like know what to say. He's like, I don't know how to explain that, but there was somebody behind Stephanie and he maintains that to this day. He's like, I don't know how to explain it. Ghosts are total crap, but there was a man in colonial garb behind Stephanie. So on to the next story. The next day, my mom was like, that was so cool. So she goes down and she signs us up for a ghost tour, but it wasn't just a ghost tour. It was like a paranormal ghost hunt and like a Ghost Adventures, like lockdown style. So we hustle down the mountain, I'm like, we're going by the battlefield, like wave. I'm like, hey, hope I don't see you tonight. No, like, no offense. And just in case, the soldier was there. It's like, go rest, be at peace. Anyway, we go down, assemble with the ghost crew. There's like 3 other families, and they tell us that they're going to an old soundstage, which is probably the most active place on the island. So I'm like, this is sick, right? Like, this is awesome. So background, again, they filmed a movie called Somewhere in Time on the Island, and the cast was so insistent that they were having like ghost experiences that they made production shut down and they refused to film in that soundstage or on the island. So they moved production for a movie that was based on the island to be moved off the island because they were so scared. So apparently the soundstage, they go in they tell us the history. It's built on, shockingly, an old Indian burial ground. And a guy used to work in it named Harvey, and his wife left him for another guy that worked in the soundstage, and he himself and haunts it. And there was something to do with a fire. So they lock us in. It's pitch black. They pull out like all the sound machines and stuff, and I'm like, I don't, always been interested by ghosts, but I'm like, I don't want to get like bit by one, So they start telling us that one of the things that the actors would experience was burns on their body in the shape of a handprint, like 3rd-degree burns. And they were so alarmed by this, they'd have to get medical care. I mean, it was like bubbling burns in the shape of a male handprint. And that was when the cast was like, enough. And so they start turning on the machines. And after about 5 minutes, I hear my mom go, "Ow, God." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "I think I got bit by something." So anyway, fast forward, we didn't see anything, shocker. And we go back up the mountain, top the island, go to bed. Everything's fine. We think Mom got bit by a bug, whatever. Wake up in the morning, I hear a blood-curdling scream. Run down the hallway, my mom's in the bathroom. She has her nightgown lifted up, I can see her calf. There is a man-sized, I swear on my grandfather's life, there was a man-sized handprint on my mother's, handprint burn on my mother's calf. And, like, complete, like that. She's freaking out. So she's like, "Go get my camera." My mom was really big into taking pictures on these trips. She had this massive Canon camera. I take a picture of it. And she's like, "We need to go down." I think my dad was fishing or something. He wasn't in the cottage. So we go down to the paranormal place and we're like, "Is this what the actors were experiencing?" And they're like, "This is exactly what they were experiencing. You need to also go get medical care." We couldn't get into the little clinic on the island. So my mom basically just bandaged it up, put some Neosporin on it. Was very freaked out. And so we get back to the cottage and my dad's there. "Where were you guys?" And my mom was like, "Look at this, Stephanie." She's like, "This is what it looks like now." Still terrible, but she unwraps it but she's like, "I want to show you how it looked this morning." I go and get the camera, pull up the pictures from the morning. Her leg's there. The pictures that I took are there. The pictures of the burns are not. The burns are not on the leg. The burns disappeared out of the photos. So like you could see them on her leg in person. You couldn't see them on the photos. They were not in a single photo. To this day, they're not in the photos from the trip. All the pictures I took where there should have been a burn are in the memory card, but the burn is out of the picture. So, yeah, my mom had that happen to her. Traumatized her so bad. She still has a scar on her leg. Traumatized her so bad. I mean, this thing would not go away. She won't watch a horror movie. She won't watch a ghost movie if there's anything demonic. I mean, she won't even turn on a Ghost Adventures in the house. And yeah, that was the last time we ever went on a ghost tour, and scared the crap out of all of us. Not enough out of me to never go again, but that also didn't happen to me. But yeah, it disappeared out of the photos. And yeah, my mom had a phantom poltergeist burn on her leg. So I have more stories. This is super fun, just getting to do this. So if you would like to hear, I actually have the biggest one that is bigger than this one, took place in Spain. So if anybody wants to hear it, let me know. If not, thanks for asking to hear more stories. And yeah, these are our ghost adventures.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so I'm going to do this one again because, again, I have lots of stories in my storybooks of horrors, I guess. But back in 2019, we got custody of my nephews. Me and my older kids lived in a little 2-bedroom apartment, which back then for us was perfect. It was fine, right? But going from 3 kids to 5 kids, we definitely had to find a bigger house.
So we moved into this house that was great. Had really large bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, which was great because at that time we only had one bathroom. It was great. Walking distance to the kids' school and a park. But when we moved in, things took a turn for the worse. My brother ended up taking his life about, I'd say, 2 weeks after we moved in. And we just started noticing bad feelings. My older son and one of my adopted sons would say that they kept seeing like this really super tall, like really tall shadow man. And even at night, like when they were downstairs playing video games and all the lights were out, like it was blacker than the blackness on the walls, they would say, like blacker than night. And he was super tall. And so that would just freak them out and scare them. We also had a friend of mine who's a medium. She came in to help me kind of talk to my brother and figure things out because I just needed to know what happened. And she said, "Hey, I'm picking up on 2 other spirits here. Or, excuse me, 3 other spirits. 3 other spirits besides your brother. One was a little boy who just randomly was there. No one knew why or where. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't anything. Another was, we called him the Angry Man. He was the biggest influence in that house, I think. But he was an older gentleman from somewhere in the neighborhood who had passed away and was just angry. Did not want to move on, just wanted to stay here for some reason in our house. Who knows why? And in that house, like he would, again, we couldn't have pictures on the wall. We tried. There was a picture on the wall that one night we heard footsteps in the hallway and like heavy walking, almost running in the hallway. And we came out of our bedrooms, me and my son Aiden, and all of a sudden one of the pictures flew off the wall and just shattered everywhere right in front of our eyes. Mind you, this is upstairs, so there's no windows in the hallway, there's no anything. Everyone's doors were shut. Like, nothing could have smashed this picture off the wall. He also was very responsible for the feelings that we got in the house. Especially me. It affected me because I know I was under a lot of stress, and so I'm sure that he was just sucking and feeding off of me and my stress during that time. But whenever we were at the house, like I would just feel angry, irritable, sad, just super depressed. Mind you, after a couple months even of things passing through. And whenever I would leave the house, even if it was just to go to the grocery store, everything would be lifted. And then when we'd get back home and I'd pull into the garage, instantaneously, just that heavy, just yucky feeling that I would have. My grandma was the third spirit, or the other spirit there. She said that my closet was a portal, and so spirits would just kind of come in and out of my bedroom closet, which was fine. I told her, that's fine. You can stay as long as you want. Ryan can stay as long as he wants. but everybody else got to go. Like, we didn't want anybody else there. And it got really bad to the point where Department of Human Services was coming over to our house, I think 2 times a month during that time frame, because they had to check on the boys, they had to check on me, everything that was going on with my brother and sister-in-law at that time. And I remember our caseworker finally came over. This was like, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 months after we moved in. And we were sitting at the table going over things, talking about the possibility of adoption and trying to move in that direction, which is what we wanted ultimately. And she kept looking up at the stairs. And this was in broad daylight, mind you. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And she was like, "Uh-huh." And we all of a sudden kept hearing running upstairs. My 3 older kids were not at home, and the 2 boys were downstairs because they have to be. She has to look in, make sure they're okay. So they were downstairs. There was no one upstairs at all. And she was like, "Have you ever thought of moving?" And I was like, "No." And I have never talked to her about what I see, what I feel, what I hear. She doesn't know any of that. And she was like, "Okay." She was like, "I don't want to freak you out." She's like, "But I keep seeing, every time I come over here, I keep seeing a really tall shadow figure, like peeking over the banister." And she was like, "Now that I'm hearing running," and she's like, I never feel good when I come over here. I never feel comfortable, and I feel scared." And she was like, "I think we're going to help you move, is my request. I'm going to put it in our file. We're going to get some funds for you, and we're going to move you out of here." So, per the request of the state, we had to move because of our ghosties in that house, which was very interesting. They didn't follow us over there. They all 3, I'm assuming, stayed over there as well. But yeah, that was just another story of ours that's interesting. So,
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
I have had a number of paranormal experiences throughout my life and childhood. So, starting with number 1, I remember when I was 5 years old, my mom had this black bowl with red inside from Japan, and she had company, and I remember kind of being eye level to this table and seeing this bowl with cookies and thinking I wanted some cookies. And I remember the bowl lifting up and seeing underneath it and it dropping, and it shook me to the core. I remember telling my mom, the bowl lifted up and it dropped, and it was just something that we just never talked about again. Another thing that had happened was when I was probably about 9 years old, I was in the bed with my sister, so we had a bunk bed and we shared a bedroom. And where we lived, it was in this neighborhood in Anchorage, Alaska, and we had a split level duplex, and the back of the duplex where the bedroom was descended down, so it was actually a 2nd story. And there was a big backyard, and there was no traffic that would pass or ever pass by this window, or even the ability for anybody to climb by the window or anything, because we were on the 2nd story and there's nothing back there. One day I'm sleeping and I look, and the window just starts turning this like fluorescent green color, like almost like the color of my nails, but like a green light, and the whole room is flooding with this green light. And I'm shaking my sister. I'm like trying to wake her up. I'm like, "Wake up, wake up, wake up." And her body's like jelly, like she won't move. I don't know what to do. I can't lift her up. I start running. I run to go get my dad in the living room, and I'm like, Dad, there's this light. And he's like, "Why did you leave your sister?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I didn't know what to do." And I went back there, and it was kind of like nothing had happened. And the next morning I told my sister what happened, and she had no recollection of it, but it shook her to her core, it shook me to my core, it changed our lives. And ever since then we would sleep with knives under our beds. My sister always had a knife under her mattress. And from what I know, my sister's personal experience, which I don't want to share all of it, but she has been visited by this light and these beings and entities. They're like almost like see-through, shimmery extraterrestrials that have visited her. And my mom has had this experience too. And I've actually talked to other people who had this experience as well, because sometimes I'll be around somebody and I'll just have a sense, and I'll be like, "Have you had experiences with extraterrestrials?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, how do you know?" And I'm like, "What do they look like?" And then they'll tell me that they're clear, shimmering, like entities. So that's another thing. So being psychic and having like certain abilities definitely runs in my family. I personally think I've started to come to terms with that in like my relationship to the spirit world. But when I was young, I didn't really understand that, and my mom didn't have conversations about that with myself or my sisters until we got older. So mind you, we are still in this place. We stay in this place until I'm in my senior year of high school. And one thing that I would say I notice is that there's activity when I have high stress or people or things things happening in my life where there's like a big shift or change that needs to happen. I don't know what that's about energetically, but I, thinking back now that I'm 40 years old, I'm like, oh, that was going on, that was going on, that was going on. So at this point in my life, I'm senior in high school. I'm with somebody who's they're just too much. They're in jail. There's drama. There's girls coming for me. There's just a lot of energies and people around me that are not the best. But I'm also trying to keep up with all these other responsibilities. So I'm doing a lot. I'm like working out for, track and field, going to school, going to work, and doing homework late at night, and doing all these things. But I was maintaining, and I had a goal, but it was just like a weird energetic time. I remember one day I come home from, I'm at home. I'm cleaning my bedroom. I'm doing things that I need to do, and I roll the vacuum into the bedroom. So I roll the vacuum in the bedroom. It's still, the plug is still rolled up. And I'm picking up some tacks off the floor, like little things that I think are going to maybe get in the vacuum. And I'm doing this. Mind you, it's not plugged in. And all of a sudden, the vacuum just turns on. Like, the vacuum is on, the light in the front is on, it's whirring, it's going, and I'm just, like, shocked. I start screaming, I start running, I run to the living room. My mom and my 3 sisters are there. They're like, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And I'm like, the vacuum, and I'm just crying. And I just never experienced anything on that level before, and it shook me to my core. And in the same time frame, I had come home late from work one night. It was a Sunday. The Sunday papers sprawled all over the living room table, and I'm working on homework on the computer next to the TV. At one point, the volume just goes all the way up on TV, and the channels start changing. And I'm like, maybe it's because of the newspaper or something's on the remote. I go to find the remote, and I'm holding it in my hand, and the channels are still changing. And I just turned everything off because I just couldn't take it, and I just went to bed because I was like, this is too much. So fast forward, I'm in my own apartment, my first apartment that I've ever had. It's an older building, and I'm dating this guy, and I had these boots that I got from work. I was working as a wardrobe stylist at E, and the person I styled, she gave me these boots. They were my boots. I love these boots. I wore these boots every single day. They were the only thing. I just had this pair of boots by my front door, and that was what I'd wear. I was just obsessed with them. And one day, they were just gone. I don't know what happened. They were just gone. And I had been thrifting and finding things to furnish my place. And at this point, I had a grenade case. It was like a military grenade box or some sort of artillery box. It had handles. It had somebody's name on it. I wasn't thinking. I just thought it would look cool. And I had it in my living room, and I had a bunch of stuff on it that never came off of it. I was smoking weed a lot of the time, and I had a weed tray, and it was weed dust. It was just always there. I never lifted the top. So I asked the person I was seeing at the time, I was like, where's my boots? Have you seen my boots? Were you hiding them? Were you playing a prank on me? And they were like, I did not touch your boots. And I'm asking them, did you touch my boots? Where's my boots? They're like, I swear on my dead dad, I did not touch your boots. I believe him. So, because I know he wouldn't talk about his dad like that. So a month goes by. I decide I'm going to do some spring cleaning, and I'm just the boots are just gone. And I clean the table off, the box, and I finally clear it for the first time. Right under, when I lift the lid, the boots are sitting perfectly in the middle of the box. That always tripped me out. I have a few other stories, but I'm going to get to the biggest one that's happened in the past 4 years, I would say. I was going through a hard time living with my mom and dad, and they lived in this house in Las Vegas at this point, right? They lived in this place for a long time, and they finally bought another house. And at that same time, my mom and her sister were reuniting from Japan. And so my aunt and my cousin were coming from Japan. And mind you, my cousin has been seeing dead people for as long as we can remember. It's been an issue. My mom sees them, but my cousin had to get into religion to be able to stop seeing these entities, right? And so I know they're coming. I know we're moving into this. We're kind of migrating to this new house anyways. And so I'm like, they're going to stay in this bedroom. My mom's like, can you clean this up for them? I'm like, sure. So I'm just like, well, we got to move anyways. Let me just empty out the closet, empty everything out, put everything in bags, and just clear the room out. And at the time, my cat was there, Pluto. So I remember I had finished everything. I had a candle. I was laying in the bed, and in the bed, there was a mirror at the end. That was the closet. And I was laying there, and I felt the weight of the cat, and I closed my eyes. Mind you, nothing has ever happened in this house, ever. I'm laying there, and I feel something staring at me, and I open my eyes, and there's this blobby, terracotta being hovering over the top of me, staring down at me. And it didn't have a human form or figure, but it was staring at me. And I remember I just did the thing where I do where I'm like, I can't take this, I'm passing out, I can't do this. I pass out, and the next day I go to my mom, and I'm like, Mom, I tell her about this. She's like, let's wait to talk to your cousin and your aunt about it. And I'm like, okay. So we see them, we wait a couple days, because we can't talk about this in front of all family. My dad's not into this, whatever. And we are at Einstein's Bagels. Mind you, they're staying in this room. And my cousin looks at me and goes, there's a man in your room. I'm like, yeah. I'm just so shook. I can't even believe that she's calling this, because we had not had a chance to talk. My mom and I were like, what? This is crazy. And my cousin goes, he's always been in the house, but he saw that you were leaving, and he was crying. He's crying in the corner of the room, crying because he's so happy that you finally saw him, and he wanted you to see him before you leave because he saw when you emptied the room that you were leaving, and he wanted to present himself to you. And I just remember my stomach turning, and I was like this. I was just like I just couldn't believe it. And my aunt was like, yep, like, because she saw him too. And my cousin was like, so if you see him again, if he shows himself to you again, do not talk to him, do not acknowledge him, nothing. Just act like he is nothing to you. Do not, because if you open that door, that's a hard door to close. Like, don't open that door. And my aunt was like, yeah, don't open it. And they both told me, don't worry, we're gonna get rid of him. Just give us some time. We're gonna get rid of him so he doesn't follow you or stick to you in your life. And I was like, okay, like, like, what is this? This is so trippy. And mind you, they are prayer warriors in like Shingon Buddhism, because my cousin had been haunted and plagued by seeing all these entities from her childhood, that the only thing that had got rid of them was the religion. So I'm in good hands. A couple days later, I'm on a hike with my aunt, and me and her end up kind of separating from the group, and we're by ourselves. And my aunt's so incredible. She has so much energy, and she's in her 70s, and we did this super intense hike with some friends and my sister, and she just turns to me and she goes, don't worry, he's gone. It's gone. And I'm like, thank you. So yeah, I have more stories. I just had something happen like last month, but if you want to hear more, let me know. But those are my stories.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
Okay, this story is crazy, but before I tell you this, I just want to say right off the bat, I don't know if I believe in ghosts. Like, I don't know. I just know that I saw something with my own eyes and experienced things and watched some of my family members go through really bizarre things. I'll just lay them out for you. We can unpack later, okay? So this happened when I was about 8 years old. I was living in Brooklyn, New York with my mom, my little sister, and my little brother. It was just the four of us, okay? That's important. So if you're not familiar, the way a lot of older apartments in New York City are set up are the floor plan is linear, so each room leads to the next. So you would walk in through the front door, and then you could walk through almost like a main hall that cuts through all the rooms, or at least all the apartments I lived in Brooklyn were like this. So this particular apartment was not great condition. It was immediately on top of a bodega, and the landlords, I don't know if we ever met them, they didn't seem to give a shit. Half the winters, we didn't even have heating. There was for sure mold issues happening in this apartment. I developed terrible asthma while living there, and the mold thing is going to come up later because it's kind of like my rational brain trying to make sense of what I saw. So just put a pin in that. I can't remember exactly when weird things started happening, but I do remember that it happened first to my little brother. My little brother was having terrible night terrors. He's about 4 years younger than me, and he was having horrible night terrors. And he would wake up screaming, and he would say that he was scared of the green man. And we just kind of dismissed it at first. Like, we just thought maybe it was something he saw in a cartoon or a movie, like he was a young kid. Like, we didn't take it seriously. But there was this other thing that kept happening that was unsettling to me as an 8 year old, which is that my brother would wake up with terrible nosebleeds, like insane nosebleeds. Like, he would be drenched in blood, like it was something out of a horror movie. It was crazy. Like, the first time it happened, my mom literally called 911 because she thought her kid was dying. Like, that's how bad it was. So obviously the nosebleeds were dismissed as like, oh, it's just some people get nosebleeds, like it's fine. Even though my brother to this day has never again had a nosebleed. Like, I literally just texted him to ask him, like, did you ever get nosebleeds again? He never got nosebleeds after we left that apartment. I don't know what was going on with my younger sister at this time. I'll have to check in with her. But the first time something weird happened to me was on one particular winter night where we had to sleep with our coats on. I'm exposing myself as a poor, but there was no heating at this time, so we had to sleep with our winter coats on. It was freezing. And I remember so vividly that this was the type of coat that you would zip up and then you would Velcro on. Okay? The reason I specify that is because I did that. I zipped it up and I Velcroed it on, and I woke up in the middle of the night and the coat was lying beside me. And I remember at the time I thought, oh, I must have like wiggled out of it. There's no way I wiggled out of that coat. Okay? It was really freaking weird that it was just lying beside me, but whatever. I put it on, and then I hear the voice of a man. I can't remember what the man said. Like, I can't remember what, I just remember hearing the voice of a man and I got like really scared and I ran to my mom's room. So that was the first time. And remember, there should not be the voice of a man in our apartment. There were no men in our apartment. It was just my mom, my little brother, my little sister, and me. Like there were no men there. So the next thing I remember happening is, and I don't know like how far apart these events were, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Maybe I heard a voice, I don't know, but I remember waking up, looking at the doorway that led to my mom's room, and seeing a man standing there looking at me. And immediately I knew that this was not a man because he was like, oh God, I'm gonna sound so crazy. He was translucent almost, like he had like a greenish glow to him, the green man that my brother kept talking about. But yeah, he had like this weird like, green glow to him. It's so like I can't even, it like hurts my brain to think about because I don't want to believe in this stuff. So this man, a couple things that stuck with me. Number one, he was kind of leaning on the doorway and he was looking at me and he wasn't like inherently menacing. Like I remember just being like surprised that he was there and surprised that he was like kind of like glowing and green. It was just, I just thought it was weird, but I wasn't like, I don't remember being scared. I almost remember him looking at me with like adoration in his eyes. But it was like the kind of thing that just like made me uncomfortable. And so the next thing I remember is running. I don't even know if I ran through him or he had already disappeared. I don't know, but I just remember running through the doorway to my mom's room. I told my mom what happened, and I remember she said something like, "Oh, sweetie, it was probably like your dad thinking about you or something," because my parents were divorced at this time, and I felt like, okay, yeah, maybe I imagined it, maybe I don't know, like it was such a weird like thing to say, but I don't know that she could think of anything else to like kind of calm me down because I was apparently really terrified. Now, this next part I don't remember, but my mom said to me like a couple years ago, we were talking about this, and she said that I told her that the guy and I talked, and he told me not to go to my mom, or he told me like not to tell my mom. Oh my God. I don't remember that part, but that's what my mom told me that I said to her that night, and I completely like blacked that out. I don't remember that at all. I don't remember talking to him. I'm so creeped out right now. It's so dark in my room. Oh my gosh, I'm not built for like scary stories. I really should not have tried to unpack this tonight. Anyway, so okay. So again, I don't remember the specific timeline of how much time like passed between these things, but the next weird thing that I remember happening in this apartment was that it burned down. There was a fire that originated in our apartment because it was an apartment building that had like several units in it. There was a fire that originated in our apartment in our bathroom, and I remember it was a big deal because I remember there were like these intimidating grown-ups that like came to where we were staying and like asked us questions, like asked me questions specifically, because I was like the first one to see like the smoke. And I remember like them trying to get to the bottom of like what caused the fire. And I asked my mom and she said she doesn't remember them ever like figuring it out. So it was like unknown reason for a fire in a bathroom. Like, okay. So we eventually moved to another apartment that it was actually like a duplex. So when we moved into the second floor, the second story of like a house. And something I God, I gotta ask my mom. Like something weird was happening there too. I don't know if my brother was also still talking about the green man or something. Something was happening with my little brother. I wasn't seeing anything anymore. I didn't see anything else, but my little brother was like having like more night terrors and like, you know, like being freaked out. And I think my mom took it more seriously this time around. She literally, like, I'll never forget this. She went and got holy water. Like, we're Catholic. She went to the Catholic church that we would go to every Sunday. She got holy water. I, to this day, core memory, I see her, like, kind of like, like spreading it around the house. And I could be making this part up because I could be just, it could be revisionist history. I feel like my brother stopped complaining after that. I really, really feel like that was it. Like after my mom did the holy water, there was like, he stopped seeing the green man. What the? I know this sounds crazy. Okay. So I mentioned earlier that that first apartment very likely had a mold issue. And the reason I brought that up is because the skeptic in me really hangs on to this as an explanation for why I saw what I saw, because there are types of mold that can cause visual and auditory hallucinations, and there's a correlation between like mold and paranormal experiences. I It doesn't explain everything. Like I said, I don't know. I don't know what to believe, but this is what I saw. And was it a hallucination? I guess it could have been, but then how did my coat get off my body? I don't know. I'm scared.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Whoa, did I make a mistake? It was around 2005 or 2006. My family and I went to an arts and crafts show in Dahlonega, Georgia. My mom had a booth there and it was a weekend kind of deal. We got there a day early to set up, but the following day, it was around noon. I decided I was gonna go walk around and look at other people's booths and to go try to find some food. There was this like really unique street with some like local mom and pop shops. I decided that I was gonna go walk down, see what they had to offer. You know, it's a little quaint town, kind of looked like it was straight out of a movie. So I started going down the street to these stores, and I came across this one shop that looked really interesting. It had like muted earth tones, kind of not vibrant at all. There were store closing signs, and it kind of looked like a bookstore. So I was like, okay, I'll go in and check this out, see what's going on. So I walk in and I'm greeted by this lady who's wearing all black. She has like this lace sleeves that go like all the way down, and it goes like over her fingers. Anyway, she had like a goth vibe, neither here nor there, but that's kind of the vibe of the whole place. So I walked around, I started looking at the books, and I noticed that most of them were all like witchcraft books, and there were like a lot of those healing crystals. And anyway, so none of that really interests me. I was getting ready to leave, and the lady stopped me and she said, hey, did you go look at the back room? And I said, no, I didn't see a back room. And she said, right over there. And she pointed to these like really big ornate red curtains. And she was like, yeah, it's just back there. So I said, okay, well, I'll go check it out, see what's back there. So I walked back there and she followed like closely behind me, and she said, hey, I want to show you something. And I said, okay, sure. She takes me over to this triangle that's on a stand. This triangle is wooden, and it has like this eye carved into the center. Around the eye was the alphabet and numbers 0 through 9. Around the outside of the triangle, there's like this dial with this pointer. And one could assume that the pointer was to like spell out words. It looked kind of similar to a Ouija board, but in triangular form, if that makes any sense. But anyway, the lady asked me if I wanted to try something fun, which I said, sure. So she asked me to think of a question, but don't give it to her. Don't say it out loud. She told me to look at the triangle, look like right into the eye of the triangle, and think of the question, but really focus and think of the question. And then she said that she would leave me for a little bit and come back and check on me. So I did. I looked straight into the triangle eye and looked and thought of my question. And I did this for a few minutes, nothing happened, and I was like, this is stupid. Like, I'm the biggest skeptic of these things anyway, so I didn't believe anything was going to come from it. But as I was about to walk off, the dial starts moving on its own. Now, remind you, she did tell me not to touch the triangle. Everything had to be done like on its own, so without any interference by me whatsoever. I looked at the triangle, the dial starts moving, it goes to the letter M, and then proceeds to spell out my name, Michael. It did that all by itself. That super freaked me out, And I was just kind of dumbfounded that this was actually real. So I stayed there for probably an hour, like asking different questions to this thing, and every single time it got them right and it was moving on its own. I was super enamored by this thing at this point, and I was like, okay, I need to go get my mom and my sister so they can vouch for me that I'm not crazy and that this is actually doing this on its own and answering the questions. So I decide that I'm going to leave and go get them. But as I start to leave, this triangle starts moving again, trying to keep me there, I guess. But I didn't ask it any questions this time. It started asking me questions. It asked me if I wanted to know my future. It asked me if I wanted to know the day that I would die. Then it asked me if I wanted to be friends, to which I said no to all of them. No, thank you, no. But anyway, against my better judgment, I went and got my mom and my sister. They did not want to come with me at first. They thought I was weird for like even going in there in the first place, and I shouldn't be going into witchcraft, blah, blah, whatever. Anyway, but I was so convicted and serious in what had happened that my mom and sister came along against their better judgment as well. So they come back in the store with me. The lady greets us. She's like, "Oh, I know why you're here." And I go walk to the back of the store. I take my mom and my sister over. My sister's the first one to give it a try. She looks into the eye. I explain everything. Don't touch it. Just think your question. And she asked, like, how old am I? Like, in her mind, she thought it. And it gave the answer. She was freaked out. She said, "Done. I'm done with this." So then my mom thought that like my sister and I were playing a prank. So she was like, "Okay, I'm going to give this a try. I don't believe either of you. Like, this is ridiculous." So she does it, and she asked what the name of her parents were, and it gave it to her. So by this point, she was freaked out. My mom and my sister were like, "Peace out. We're leaving. Bye." I decided to stay and play around with it for a little bit longer, just because I was just so like into it at this point. The lady, the shop owner, I guess, she comes up to me and she says that she can tell that the triangle has built a connection to me, and she wanted to offer it to me for free. Take it with me. And I told her, "No, thank you. I really don't need to get any more involved with this than I already have." And she said, "This may be a long-term decision that you will regret." And I was like, well, that's kind of threatening, but no thanks. I really don't. I appreciate it, but no thanks. So I leave. She tells me bye. I say bye to her. Then the next day, I was thinking about it. I was like, you know what? Maybe I will go back and get it, and I'll take it and show my friends, so my friends will know that I'm not crazy when I tell them this story. I go back. I walk over to the store, and the store is gone. There's no signs, there's no product, there's nothing in this store, and on top of that, it looks like it's been run down and been sitting there for a very long time. What? Okay, that's weird. So most people would say that their story ends at this point, and that was just a weird thing that happened. This was just the beginning. All of this started happening around 2005. Until this very day, things are still happening. Stay tuned. I have more stories. It gets way crazier from here.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
14 years ago, I was pregnant with my oldest son when something, I don't know what it is, I believe attached to my oldest son, and has followed my family ever since. I don't talk about this a lot, but I will. Forewarning, I really need the whole 10 minutes, and I'm going to try my best not to have to do a part 2, but I've tried to do this a million times, and I'm just going to have to cut so much out. It may be a part 2. That being said, if I mention a story that you want me to elaborate on, or if you want more stories, because I cannot possibly tell you everything of 14 years of stuff, let me know, and I'll make a video about different things. But that being said, I'm just going to go run through the basics. So it started with us hearing and seeing things. So hearing like somebody call our name, hearing cabinets open and shut, hearing dishes moving around, just different things that literally wasn't happening. We would hear them happen, but they wouldn't be happening. Like I would hear cabinets opening and shutting while I'm looking at my cabinets and they're not doing anything. There have been cases where I saw cabinets open and shut, but not yet. I'm going to try to go in chronological order. So this is during when my son was first born and while I was pregnant. And then we started seeing things. So, for example, we had a cabinet a countertop that was directly above the junk drawers, literally the size of the drawer. And we would like put our keys and spare change on this countertop when we would get home. And we would sit there and watch. And multiple people had come to my house and witnessed this as well. I think a couple of them are even on my TikTok, and they can comment or make their own videos if they want to and let you know, like, all of what I'm saying has been witnessed by multiple people and absolutely happened. So we would watch it, just like a penny or keys or something just slide across the counter and drop into the floor with no one near it and no explanation for it. And when this is happening, we're gaslighting ourselves. We're like, there's no way, there's got to be an explanation. Like, are we really seeing what we think we're seeing? There, like, this is crazy. We didn't, especially my husband, he still, after everything that we've seen, and it gets crazy, you'll hear, he still doesn't want to admit that it's something paranormal. So then it started escalating. We tried to ignore it. And of course, we're like, we don't know what this is. We don't know what to believe. You know, we would joke like, oh, the ghost, stuff like that. But it wasn't anything serious. Then it got serious. Like one day, I got shoved out of my apartment. That's a long story that I'll have to go a lot into detail to. But my son was upstairs asleep. I got shoved out of my front door. The door slammed behind me with my son alone in my house upstairs asleep. That was probably one of the scarier things. A few weeks after that, it tried to burn down my house with myself and my son in it. And this is my oldest son. I have a 13-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I'm talking about the 13-year-old. It tried to catch us on fire. If we would have been upstairs longer, or the fire stuff would have happened like even 30 minutes sooner, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here today. Because where we were upstairs was directly above the kitchen where this all happened. So I went into the kitchen and all the burners were on and there was a fire, and I put out the fire. I went outside, made a phone call, come back in, the burners are all back on. It was scary. There's a lot more to that too. That'd have to be another video because there's no time for that. At this point, we say we're going to move. I was already pregnant again. My older two are 14 months apart. I don't want to hear judgment. And so we needed a bigger place. I only had a 2-bedroom apartment. It was a tiny little townhome. And so we needed a 3-bedroom because I was having a girl. And we just needed a bigger place. I wanted out of there. So many things had happened. And I was so uncomfortable. I just had an overwhelming feeling of dread in that apartment. And even following us and things happening, I don't think that I felt the level of just fear and dread I felt initially in that apartment. But so we move. I no longer have, my husband worked graveyard at the old apartment. Somebody stayed with me while he worked overnight because I didn't want to be alone. The new apartment, didn't have to stay alone. And then I have a friend who's also, she's a mutual of mine on TikTok. I have a friend come over. And she was one, I want to say she was one of the ones that she refused to come back to my original apartment because of the things that she witnessed. There was so many people that would never come back. I want to say she was one of them, but she can comment or whatever if that's wrong, or if she can tell you what I'm saying is true. But she was over, and I want to say it was her last time at this, the new apartment as well, because she was here. We were sitting, I was sitting on the couch by the window, and the window looked out to the front of the apartment. My husband was over by the front door, and my friend was sitting on the other wall on my love seat. And we were talking, and she was asking me actually about all the things that had happened and said, has anything happened here? And I was explaining how things were so much better. I hadn't heard or seen anything. and that dread was gone. I felt so comfortable being home alone with the kids at night, like overnight. I didn't feel scared. It was so light. The energy was just light and wonderful, and I loved it. And as I'm saying this, we hear 3 knocks on my front door. And I can't explain this. I don't know how to explain. She can vouch for this. It was not like somebody using their hand to knock or even like a foot. The only way, it had to have been some kind of object, because the noise that knock made was just weird. It wasn't like your typical knock. My husband immediately opens the door because it's a loud knock that's weird. And he's like, what? He's standing right there. So he opens the door. Nobody's there. If they ran away this way, they would have had to run through a long breezeway. We would have heard or seen them. I immediately look out the window. If they would have ran this way, I would be able to see somebody running how my window and apartment was set up here. So nobody was there. And when we see that there's nobody, it's not some little kids messing around or anything, I make the comment, it knocked and you let it in. And since then, I've like read things about like 3 knocks or something, but I haven't read too much into it because it terrifies me. But anyway, so needless to say, definitely most likely let it in, because like stuff sliding across the counters happened in our new apartment. It started with that, hearing things, seeing things. I eventually, one day I actually saw cabinets opening and closing that was in the new apartment. A TV flew across a room and broke, a big plasma TV, like those old school, it was a 19-inch old school big plasma TV. Literally, we heard a big boom and ran into my daughter's room, and she had a little plasma old school TV, and it was on the opposite side of her room than it was supposed to be, and it was broken. If you know about those TVs, you know how hard those are to break, and it was shattered. And that was scary. And then other things happened, like my son and I had the exact same sleep paralysis with the night terror. A few days apart, I had one that something evil was holding my son, and whatever it was doing froze me where I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't talk. My son was screaming for me, and this thing was just laughing at me. And I freaked out. It was my first sleep paralysis, first night terror. I woke up absolutely distraught. That's a whole nother story. A couple weeks later, he comes to me screaming and explaining the exact same dream. And so that was wild. I don't know what to make of that, but it was crazy. And then he sees it. He was like 2.5. He was going to the bathroom. He did a double take towards his room. He dropped to the floor, and all he could tell me, he was 2.5, was that there was a monster. And then he starts scrambling to me, freaking out. It took 6 months for him to go back into his room. He wouldn't even go in his room with one of us. And then just random things have happened throughout. Most recently, he's now 13 and on 2 antipsychotics to prevent him from seeing things, because he sees things like a really tall, skinny man with long, sharp fingers follows him around everywhere. And then it started being like people would scream into his ear, just scream to the top of their lungs. And then there started being like a cat with its eyes popped out, like running towards him. It was like bloody and like deranged looking, and its eyes would just be hanging out, and it would terrify him. So that it became a lot. And again, there's so much to this, and I can go into more details, but yeah, it's been a really wild 14 years.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
So I don't really participate in TikTok trends, but this is my time to shine. If you know me, you know that I have had a lot of spiritual encounters throughout my years. Some of them have been paranormal. Some of them I know it's like family members who have passed away that are coming to visit me. But this story is about my maternal grandmother and something that she experienced when she was living in Mexico. This story takes place in a coastal state in Mexico called Nayarit. And my grandmother lived in this very small town that was surrounded by nature. It was in between 2 mountains. And the people there are very superstitious, but also very spiritual. My grandmother has always practiced curanderismo, so, you know, she's very aware of spirits and practices that others might view as witchcraft, you could say. And so in this town, there was a lady, let's call her Veronica. Veronica was the town's witch, right? And not a witch that people respected and went to for help. She was very much the person that people would go to if they wanted to curse people, hurt others. So she was using her talents and her gifts for malicious intentions. And Veronica, I guess, liked my grandfather. So that's some important context for this story. My grandmother lives in between her two brothers, and the house that she lived in had a first floor, and the second floor, they were building it out because, you know, they were having more kids, they needed more space. So the upstairs had bricks, like it was just loose bricks, some cement. And another important thing is that the houses in Mexico have some of them have a wooden door and then a metal door at the front. So, you know, the door can rattle. And since my grandmother lived in between her brothers, oftentimes they would go over in the evening for some coffee, or they were butchers, so they would take her meat from whatever animals, you know, they got the meat from that day. So one night, my grandma's just hanging out, you know, doing her evening routine, and her front door starts rattling. Like, the metal one just starts rattling. And so the first thing that comes to my grandmother's mind is, oh, it's one of my brothers here to hang out. But before she went to open the door, I guess something in her gut told her, go check who it is before you actually open the door. So she goes upstairs, and remember that the upstairs is still being developed, and there's an open area, a window that doesn't have glass, so she is able to peer down. And as she looks down, she sees that it's not one of her brothers. So instead of seeing one of her brothers, she sees this huge dark dog with piercing red eyes, is how she describes it, snarling and trying to break down the door. And when my grandmother sees this thing, immediately she starts praying. She grabs one of the bricks and she's praying over it, you know, blessing it to protect herself. And as she finishes doing that, the shaking of the door just intensifies to the point where she says that the whole house felt like it was shaking. And the more that she's finishing up the prayer, the more intense it gets. Until finally she goes back to the open window and throws the brick onto the dog, and it lands on the dog's left leg, like the back left leg. And so when my grandmother throws the brick, the dog goes running down the street and just disappears into the dark night. And my grandmother, she carries on with continuing to bless and protect the house, goes check in on her kids, and concludes her day. The next day, she has to go into the town square for some errands. And lo and behold, she runs into Veronica. And Veronica has a cast on her left leg. So then my grandmother puts two and two together and realizes what she actually saw the night before. Or more specifically, who she saw the night before. And as my grandmother and one of my aunts approach this lady, my aunt tells this person, God bless you, in Spanish, and that Veronica starts spinning in circles. Like, you know, when you unravel yarn and it just spins and spins and spins? That's what Veronica was doing. And apparently, that wasn't the first time that they had an encounter with Veronica. There was some history before that. But it's definitely one of those stories where when I was younger, I was so scared that every time I went to Nayarit that I would see that person or that thing. But now I'm like, damn. There's a lot in this world that people either don't know or just choose to not acknowledge.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, hi, this is my time to shine. Now, if you saw my Susie Stitch video, you know I had a great auntie named Ann, okay? My auntie Ann is my dad's aunt, right? So she's my great auntie, but we had an auntie named Louise. Louise is Ann's auntie, so that makes Louise my great aunt. But she wasn't super old. It just sounds like that because my great grandma had a sister that was super young. So Auntie Louise and Auntie Ann, even though they were auntie and niece, they were super close in age, and they were super close, like locked in. They were more like sisters. They loved each other, right? Okay. So my auntie Louise died when I was about in 3rd grade. She died from cancer. And that's a whole nother story in and of itself, because I remember after she died, I, for some reason, had like a heightened awareness of paranormal things. Like I was suddenly afraid to be in places that I've always been alone in. I was afraid to be in them alone because I was like sensing some type of heightened sense of like a different realm or something. I don't know. But my auntie Louise died, and my auntie Ann is distraught because again they're like sisters, right? So some time after she died, I'm at my auntie Ann's house, and I'm in her room by myself. My auntie Ann, I don't even know if she's home. I don't know where my cousin Missy is. I don't know where Michael is. I don't even know where my cousin little Mikey is. Like I'm just in my auntie's room alone. That's not uncommon. Like I was always in her room by myself. She had the most peaceful room in the house. So I'm in her room by myself, and I'm sitting on the bed. I'm just watching TV, hanging out, and the bed just starts aggressively shaking. I don't mean like I may have moved and like the bed may have had some residual shake. No, the bed is like aggressively shaking with me on it. I know nobody's playing a prank on me because again I'm by myself. I would have saw anybody else in the room. My cousin Mikey was way younger than me, so there's no way he could move me and the big old bed, you know? So I knew that it was something else. I also like tested it a little bit, like I moved to make sure I wasn't tripping. Now something about me and paranormal stuff is when it happens, I don't acknowledge it. Because in my head, if I don't acknowledge it, it can't like harm me, or it like goes away, or it doesn't exist. So what did I do when that bed started aggressively shaking? I silently got up and I just slid off that bed and I just walked out the room, and I never told nobody. I didn't tell anybody. I just told my mama this story like a couple weeks ago, like for the first time. So fast forward, it's 2016 and my auntie Ann passes away, right? So we're at her house. Now this isn't the same house where the bed was shaking. This was just the last house she ever lived in. So me and my cousin Missy, who is Auntie Ann's daughter, we just in the house, and like we're all talking and we're telling stories and stuff because my auntie Ann was very paranormally inclined. Like so much stuff happened to her, and anything paranormal for me mostly always happened in one of her houses. Like her houses were the hub of paranormal activity. She has stories for days, and if I would have any like paranormal dream, I would ask her about it first because she was very like knowledgeable in that area. So anyway, we all sitting around in her house and just having memories and telling stories. So I tell the story about me sitting in my auntie Ann's room. And do you know, before I could finish that story, my cousin Missy goes, and the bed started shaking, didn't it? And I was like, how did you know that? What? Like, how did you know? And she was like, after Auntie Louise died, my mama took one of her leather-bound journals and she kept it, and she would keep it underneath the bed, underneath the mattress. And ever since she would put that leather-bound journal underneath the mattress, she was like, she don't know what it was, but the bed would just shake like that. And this is the early 2000s. Like, there wasn't any toy or, device that was doing that. So she was just like, yeah, ever since she put that journal under there, the bed would just shake all the time. So I don't know what was in that journal. I don't know what was so special about it. I don't know if it was like witchy or what, but I just thought that was so crazy, and I felt so validated because I never told nobody that story because I didn't want to sound crazy. So
I've literally watched all the stitches to this video, but this story that I'm about to tell today, even though it happened years ago, still gives me chills, and I feel like it has a lot to do with why I quit my job. So I used to work in long-term care, for those of you that don't know, pretty much a nursing home. I was a certified nursing assistant out of high school. This was my first big girl job, okay? So when I first started, I didn't know a lot about the different types of shifts, but there's pretty much 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. I worked the 7 to 3, which was 7 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As time went on, I slowly started to transition to 3 to 11 to work around my college courses. But every now and then I would pick up an 11 to 7 shift. It didn't take long before I started working there where people were telling me about this one particular resident that had an issue with people of a certain color coming into his room. I didn't have too much interaction with this resident because, like I said, I only worked 7 to 3, and you didn't have to do a lot for him. Just go in and check on him and make sure he was okay. Bring him his food tray. Every now and then he might ask you for help to go to the bathroom, but that was about it. I had heard that this resident could get kind of nasty sometimes. I also heard that he had dementia, so he was like seeing stuff. And I also remember going in his room a couple times and seeing all of the mirrors in his room covered up. This is gonna come back later. So on my first 11 to 7, we'll call this nurse Patty. Patty pulled me aside and she was like, hey, this is the list of people pretty much doing the report for when I first, clocked in, starting my shift. She told me who I had, who was total assist, which I had to do everything for, and who I could pretty much, let. So I noticed that this list had this certain patient's number on it, this certain resident's number on it. His room number was on there. But instead of it saying, just limited assistance or whatever, it was like total assist. So I asked, I'm like, I know I have him during the day and I just go in and check on him and make sure he's okay. If he rings the call light, I'll go in. But other than that, that's about it. When did he become a total assist? So she proceeds to tell me that the night before, he got so scared and so frantic and thought something was in his room that he jumped out of his bed and fell on the floor and did something to his hip. So at this point, currently, he's a total assist, meaning I have to go in, I have to check on him, I have to do everything for him. I said, cool, no problem. I start doing my rounds, I start checking on my people, passing out ice water, changing people, as I normally do. Literally not even 15 minutes into my shift, his call light is on. I go in, I make sure everything's okay. As soon as I get in, I kid you not, this man is literally in the fetal position. I walk up to him and I ask him if everything's okay. Obviously, when I walk up to him, I'm very careful because, like I stated before, he did not like people of my color coming into his room. During the day, he would make a big deal out of this. Like, if he could get a nurse or a nursing assistant of a different color, he definitely would. He did not pay that any mind. He literally jumped straight into, they're in here, they're after me, please help me. I'm looking like, who is they? He's like, you don't see that little boy behind you? No, I can't say that I do, sir. So it took me literally 15 minutes, and by the grace of God, I was able to calm this man down. We're going to call him Mr. Johnson. After I calmed Mr. Johnson down, I left out of the room, and I went and did my rounds like usual. Literally, not even 10 minutes later, he's back on the call light. I said, okay, maybe he's got to go to the bathroom or something. I don't know. So I went in, checked. This time when I went in the room, I noticed that the room was extremely cold. Extremely cold. When I went in there earlier, it was not cold like that. Now, the nursing home, that nursing home in particular was a little colder on the graveyard shift. But when I tell you it was cold to the point where I could see my breath cold. At this point, not only is he in the fetal position, but he is also under the covers and he is also crying. So I walk up to him. I lift the cover up. I look under the cover. Again, he's sitting under there. We make immediate eye contact and he's like, help me, please help me. So I'm trying to calm him down because whatever he's seeing, I'm just not seeing it. So I'm like, Mr. Johnson, I'm going to need for you to cooperate with me. I'm going to need for you to tell me what's going on so I can better assist you and we can get through this shift together. At this point, I'm doing what I've been taught to do for somebody that's going through a dementia or Alzheimer's crisis, which is what I was told that he had. He calms down a little bit and he literally just starts talking. And when I tell you this got crazy quick, it got crazy quick. So he's telling me that when he was younger, about in his 20s or 30s, he was married to a young woman. We're going to call her Maggie. Him and Maggie had just bought a farm. It was literally just him and Maggie. And before you knew it, Maggie got pregnant. Back then, it literally wasn't uncommon to have people of color hired as help to help you on the farm, to help you raise kids, whatever the case may be. This was post-slavery, but people was very much still feeling entitled to doing whatever they wanted to do to people of color. So that's the time frame we in. He tells me that months go down the line, whatever. He goes and he wakes up early one morning. He sees that his wife is a little uncomfortable. She tells him like maybe the baby's coming or whatever. He doesn't think nothing of it. He goes out, get on his tractor, and he does his farmer work. He has a farmhand named Tommy. Tommy is a black man, okay? Around lunch, he's guessing is when his wife went into labor while he was still out in the field. His wife called her mother-in-law, which was Mr. Johnson's mom, her sister-in-law, and his brothers came as well. Everybody's making sure that everything's going okay. The baby is finally born at some point. When the baby is born, I guess everybody in the room looked around at each other and realized that this baby was not in no way, shape, or form white. The brothers immediately take the baby and they go outside. His mom sits there with her and they go. They snatch this baby and they take the baby outside. Meanwhile, all this is going on. Him and Tommy are still out in the field. They took this baby out into a body of water. And I will not be saying what they did to this baby, but you can only imagine for the time period. Him and Tommy finally wrap up their work for the day and he heads back to the house. When he gets inside the house, he sees his wife sitting there with his mother. His wife is crying. His mom's just sitting there irritated and pissed off. He asks what's going on, and that's when she gives him the whole rundown that your wife was pretty much sleeping with your field hand, and this is the situation that you're in. So he asks, where's the baby? And the mom says, your brother's taking care of it. Don't worry about it. You need to figure out what you're going to do with her. Meanwhile, this is going on. His brothers have went and got Tommy out of the field. The things that they did to Tommy, again, I cannot describe it here on TikTok, but just imagine the torture and everything that he went through. They literally just left him there in that field. They left him there in the middle of the field. This man proceeds to tell me that when he finally figures out what happened and what his brothers did, they literally acted like nothing ever happened. And every night, Tommy and his son will come and visit him like clockwork. At this point, when I tell you the chills are running up my spine, literally every hair on my body is sticking up. I don't know what to say. I'm like, when they say frozen in fear, I was frozen in fear. Because it's like, as soon as he told me that story, I could pick up on what was in the room. Before, I couldn't pick up on what it was, but I could immediately feel something else in the room with us. After he told me the story, I finally got him to calm down and he went to sleep. He slept for literally a couple hours, and at this point, we're at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like clockwork, he hits that call light again. I go back in. I remember walking into the room and all of the sheets were taken off of the mirrors, which I thought was very strange because he wanted his mirrors covered up for a reason. I went over to Mr. Johnson and I touched him to make sure that he was okay, and this man was ice cold. He had died. As I went to leave the room to go contact a nurse, oh my God, I'm getting chills. I'm literally passing by this mirror, and as I'm headed out, on my left is the mirror. I turn and look in the mirror, and behind me, to the far wall of Mr. Johnson's room, I see a taller figure, and I see a shorter figure standing beside this taller figure that I would say is probably about the height of a 5-year-old child. I have never seen nothing like that in my life, ever. And I cannot explain the amount of fear that ran through my body, but I got out of that room so quick, I will tell you that. The crazy part is that when the nurse came in, we could not understand how these mirrors got uncovered. Even the one in the bathroom was uncovered. The one in his room was uncovered. Again, this is a man that just hurt his hip yesterday. There's no reason why he should have been out of bed taking these blankets off this mirror, and I know he wouldn't have done it anyway. Also, the fact that she felt like he had been dead for longer than I said he had. But again, I had just talked to Mr. Johnson. I had literally just talked to him. So I don't understand how a dead man talks, but maybe y'all can let me know. And when I tell you, baby, I only lasted 3 more days after that. I didn't sleep for days. I said, I'm not coming back. Y'all ain't gotta worry.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
I hate that I've tried to record this a few times and I keep having a technical difficulty. Gotta love it. So, when I was in my very early 20s, I was engaged. I moved to Virginia with my ex-fiance and it didn't work out. It was a really rough experience and I had to get home right away. So, I'm going home. I don't know where I'm going to be staying. My dad no longer lives in San Diego where I'm from. So, I'm like, shoot, where am I going to go? My grandmother calls me and she tells me that my mom's house is currently vacant. My mom has extreme manic depressive bipolar and she's just generally a very selfish individual. So she and I do not communicate. But my grandmother shares with me that she is removed from her home currently and she has no idea what state the home is in, but it is habitable for me. So I can live there while I figure out a roommate situation where I'm going to live. So I reluctantly say, okay, this is what I have to do. So I get to the house. It is not in a very good neighborhood. It's a townhome, but I have it to myself. And I'm a little sketched out more of the neighborhood than anything else, but whatever. This is where I'm going to live because this is where I have to. So I open the front door for the very first time, get the key and open it. And this wave of like intense heaviness washes over me. And I am just overwhelmed with the state of the home. Like right when you walk in, there's the living room and the stairs. And, I just look to the left in the living room and it's in shambles. You can tell like the couch has a dent in it. She's been laying in it for so long. And I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to be here. And I feel this like intense heaviness. And I don't take that as a red flag right away. I just think, oh, it feels heavy because it's my mom's house and I don't want to be here. And I've just gone through this traumatic event in my life and whatever, we'll make the best of it. So looking around the house, I can see that the kitchen is disgusting. Like there's rotted food, like in the fridge, on the counter, in the sink. It's disgusting. I go upstairs and her room is dark and icky and I don't want to be in there. So I just pass it. So up the stairs, there's her room at the top of the bathroom and then the guest room. So I'm like, whatever, I will start with the guest room and make it my own, clean it, take care of it. Because my mom's manic bipolar, she collects. So the guest room took a very long time, putting things away, reorganizing furniture, cleaning, throwing away trash. I am finally starting to make some headway on the guest room and feeling pretty good about it. So one night I'm sleeping and I wake up, I'm on my side and I wake up and I see the alarm clock and it's the magic hour, it's 3 a.m. So I'm like, great. And as that's processing, I realize I can feel something at the side of the bed. Demanding, like standing there, almost like you can't hear or feel breathing, but there's like this intensity. And I'm like, oh, I know what this is. I know exactly what this is. And if you know about these things, if you hear something, no, you didn't. If you see something, no, you don't. Keep moving. So I'm like, whatever. And I go to bed. When I wake up in the morning, I realize, okay, this is what we're dealing with. So I don't know exactly what I'm dealing with, but I just choose to ignore it. So I finish cleaning up the room and I start making my way towards cleaning the living room and the main level. So as I'm going up and down the stairs, clean the main level, and the house is getting lighter, it's feeling airier, it's feeling healthier, like the vibe is feeling healthier, I start to smell this nasty, rotting smell at the top of the stairs. When you go up the stairs, you see her room right away, and every single time, just this intense, nasty smell. And I'm like, oh God, I know what this is, but I just have to ignore it. So I keep cleaning, keep making the space feel better, all the while basically cohabiting with this being that desperately wants my attention. And I know it wants my attention. The best way I can describe whatever this was is that it was not human, also a red flag. This was not a spirit. This was a thing. It felt young. It felt curious about me. It almost felt like I got this vibe, like, where's the other one at? Like my mom, like, where's the other one at? Like it wanted her negative energy and her like rotting that she would do. And I didn't give that. I was providing positivity and brightness and openness to this new space. And it was not happy with me for that. As I was cleaning the home, I would generally avoid my mother's room. One, because I don't have a relationship with her, so I didn't really care to be in her room or clean it. That's her business. but also just the darkness in there. And like, I swear sometimes that door was open and I would close it. Sometimes I would go to the top of the stairs, smell the smell, see the darkness in her room, and just be like, why is that door even open? And for some reason that room like called to me. And I went in a couple times and like went through her things, which is so not like me. I have no interest in going through her things, but I remember going in there, and I don't remember much of what happened while I was in there. I remember going through like old pictures of me and my sister from when we were kids. I remember going through her closet, but that's about it. And the whole time I would be in there, I would just feel like warbly and off, like very out of body experience. There's a filter kind of like this. Like, these are kind of like my memories of being in that room, like going through pictures, going through the closet. I don't really remember much. So I'm really starting to make progress on the cleaning. I've accepted that I'm cohabitating with this little creature, whatever it is. So I'm minding my business, and I don't hang out in places that it likes, primarily my mom's room and the living room, where she would rot for days and weeks. I just mostly hung out in the guest room when I wasn't cleaning or working or trying to find a place, and I would watch TV on my laptop. So finally, D-Day comes. It's time to get to the kitchen. I'm going in and out of the kitchen from the guest room. I avoided that living room. Guest room, down the stairs, through the hallway, kitchen. And I'm watching TV on my laptop, holding it, walking through the hallway. And lately, I feel like the being had kind of just accepted I wasn't going to give it attention, but I was still ever present that it was there. And I knew I wouldn't hang out with it in the living room. So I'm walking into the kitchen, holding my laptop, living room behind me, kitchen in front of me, and my laptop just dies. Just the black mirror just dies. And I know it's charged. I know I charged it. So I'm like, what the heck? And something comes over me. I realize, do not look at that computer and do not turn around. Like, deep in my soul, like, do not. This thing wants your attention. It wants either to show you it in that black mirror or to get you to turn around to go back into that room. You're going to see something if you look in this laptop screen or turn around. So I just shut the laptop, walk into the kitchen, keep cleaning. Like, I didn't even notice the laptop had died. After a few minutes, I go, oh, my laptop died. Like, audibly say it. Like, I pretend I didn't notice, and go get the charger, bring the charger back down into the kitchen, and keep cleaning. After the home was pretty much cleaned, within a few days, I ended up finding a roommate and finding a place. So I moved out, left that behind, never experienced that little creature or critter ever again, thank goodness. But yeah, that was a really intense, it was like a battle of wills. This thing was almost like a child, but it wasn't a human, but it felt like a childlike presence. And it was just, look at me, demanding my attention. And I wouldn't give it any attention. So we just were kind of fighting over who was going to get their way. And I just ignored it until it went away or I was able to leave. I don't speak to my mom much. I never told her about this experience, but from what I understand in the times I do have to interact with her, she has gotten a new place. And this is kind of what confirms for me that this was not a ghost, because ghosts haunt places, other things haunt people. And my mom has said, or I have heard, that in her new place, she has suddenly stopped liking to stay in her guest room or her master bedroom, and she sleeps in the guest room because something in the master doesn't feel right, and it feels like she's not alone in her master bedroom. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. I realize that sounds like a script or like a baseline for a really messed up movie, and it could have gone a lot worse than it did. Thank God it didn't. But no, that's a true story. And as far as I know, that thing still hangs out with my mom and her negative energy to this day.
Okay, so I'm back for part 3 of this ghost saga that people have asked me for the part 3 for. I'm on a road trip with my boyfriend to go to Canada. So if it's spotty, it's because we're going to Canada. Okay, so my story takes place in Spain in 2012, and yeah, let's get into it. So I was basically there for my dance company, and this story takes place in Ronda, which is, I believe it was in Ronda, I could be wrong, but it was whatever city that the Spanish Inquisition started in. So there was about 30 of us that were performing our dances around the country, and it was a smaller group. My mom came as a chaperone. This is important to the story. And we get out of the bus at this destination, and the town is old. It's very, very old. The building across from where we were performing was where they held like the trials for the Inquisition, and then the building that we were actually performing in was a modern church built on the foundation of a home church business from the 1400s. And so we were going to perform that night, so we did our rehearsals, we did everything, and then to basically put our stuff away, we had to go down into the basement, and there was this huge spiral staircase that went down, and I mean, it's an old basement foundation, so it's a decently sized spiral staircase going down, and this is relevant to the story. And when you get to the bottom of the stairs, you walk straight ahead, and then you turn, and it was like this big open room, and then you turn right, and then it was like a room of like old brick and cement walls with 3 rooms on each side with electricity, but their own plug-ins with like hair dryers and sinks. And then if you walked straight ahead, then there was like the big getting ready room with like the long vanity and the bathroom stalls. So this is actually very important to the story. So there was a dance that I was not participating in because I had been out sick the year before, and I just chose not to be in this particular piece. So that night I knew I was going to have to be in the basement by myself, and when I got to the building initially, it was just kind of a little bit off. There was just something about the vibes. It wasn't like the way it looked, it was just, there was just something a little bit weird about it. And so I was kind of prepping myself that I knew during the last number of the performances of the night I was going to be in the basement by myself in this building. So fast forward, we all put our stuff down in the basement. Everybody starts getting ready for the show. We go on stage. I get done with my number. I'm the only person that comes downstairs, and there's nobody else in this wing of the building except for me, and anybody else that's in the building is either backstage of the theater, the stage, or in the audience, and they don't have access to this part of the building. And I go down. Basement's pretty creepy. I mean, it's the original foundation of whatever was there before. So I'm putting my stuff away. And I hear men's boots walking down the stairs, like a thunk, 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 and it wasn't like a sneaker. It was like a thick, heavy shoe. And I was immediately like, who is that? We didn't have any man in our group that was big enough to make noises like that wore shoes like that. There wasn't a man in the building that was wearing shoes like that. So that was a little weird. So I went to the bottom of the stairs and I called up and I was like, hello, you know, and then I called one of the chaperones' names, and I was like, hello, is this so-and-so? And nobody answered. So I went back into the changing room, past all of those 3 rooms on each side, and went back into the changing room picking up my stuff, and then I hear it again. And I go to the bottom of the stairs, and it's just like getting louder. It's like coming closer towards me, like coming down the stairs. And I was like, hello. And so I decide to walk up the stairs and see what's going on. And I walk up the stairs, and I'm like going up the spiral, and the footsteps get louder, and then I hear the footsteps and feel this cold breeze, and the footsteps pass me, and now I'm freaked out. And so I run back down into the basement, and I don't know why I did that, but I run back down into the basement, and I run into the changing room that I was originally in, and then all of a sudden the footsteps stop, and then there's a massive crash, like a car had run into the building, and all of the lights start flickering, every single light, and all of the hair dryers turn on one by one in the rooms, like the individual changing rooms that are plugged in by themselves, by the way, in their own outlets. The water starts running and the toilets start flushing, and then the footsteps start again, except they start getting really, really, really loud and they start going faster. So I freak out. I dropped my foundation bottle on the floor and it broke. I ran upstairs. I ran backstairs. I told the dance coordinator, I was like, something's going on. Is there somebody downstairs? She's like, no, why would there be anybody downstairs? And I asked the curator of the building, like, what's going on? Who's downstairs? And he's like, I'm the only man that has access to that part of the building, and I've been back here the whole time because I have to watch the show to make sure everything's going okay in the building that I manage. So, and I forgot the part of the story where when I ran up the stairs to go find humans, as soon as I hit the top of the stairs, all of the hair dryers, everything turned off, went back to normal, the boots stopped, the stomping stopped. So yeah, that scared me immensely, and the only way, there's no explanation for it, because all of the hair dryers were plugged in individually in each of their own rooms. You would have had to have 6 people plugging in and turning on hair dryers. You would have had to had 6 people turning on the faucets, turning on and off the lights. I don't understand it. It scared me so bad. And there was some other stuff that happened on that trip that happened to my mom, so I can talk about that in another video because people seem to be enjoying these. But that was probably by far the most terrifying one. And plot twist, when we left, we asked the curator like what the building was, and he was like, oh, this was the site of where the first family or first person in the Inquisition got accused. So there's that. So that's my ghost story about Spain. Terrifying. Beautiful country though, you should totally go. So let me know if you want more.